you probably don't want your dog to bark out of your window at things going on outside of your house. I certainly didn't with my dogs. So I'm going to break down a couple of things that I did to help curb that with my puppies to make sure that it was mostly, if not always, quiet in my house so that we didn't have them reacting to things outside. Now, I do have 2 puppies and they're really good at what I call just watching. And that's an actual cue that I give my girls that has worked really well for us that we're going to get to in a minute. But every once in a while, because they are still puppies, they do find things to bark at. So it's a continuing process for us. It's something that we're still working on, but for the most part, they're really good about not barking at things. So with that in mind, I wanted to make sure my dogs were very socialized from the moment I brought them into my house. Now I have other videos on this, so we're going to do a surface level with this one, but you can go a little bit deeper in some of the other videos as well. One of the first things that I did was to make sure that they saw people around them. So they weren't afraid of people. So they knew that people existed, that they would walk nearby, that they would drive around, that they would do things. I wanted to make sure that they were very, very socialized in the knowledge that people exist and we're not barking at them, we're not disturbing them, we're not upsetting them, we're not engaging with a lot of them. So one of my first steps was that I would put my puppies in the car and I would drive to Walmart or to Target or to a grocery store or to somewhere with a parking lot and a crowded parking lot, not just a couple of people parking lot, somewhere with a crowd. We would go and we would park and I would sit in the back seat with my dogs. And from the time they were puppies, I taught them what it was like to watch people. I taught them how to behave. And so I would sit in the back of the car with them and let them pop their little heads up to watch out the windows. And when they started to get scared, I would calm them. If they started to get excited, I would calm them. And I would talk them through the process of how to behave. I showed them and they mirrored what I did as we were watching people. So I would tell them, we're watching these people. This person's walking by. We don't need to bark. We don't need to climb over the seat. We can just watch. And I effectively taught them the just watch cue. Just watch means you can look, you can jump up to so you can see, but you cannot bark. You cannot make noise. We're not whimpering. We're not barking. We're not growling. And I effectively taught them how to just watch. This comes into play when I transition over to letting them watch out of the house windows. So I taught them in the car in an enclosed space where I had full and total control over them and lots of windows for them to see around and lots of people walking near the car, far away from the car, driving by, making noise, people stopping directly outside of my car to have a 10-minute conversation. I'll run with it. And I taught my dogs how to accept being around people and how to watch because my girls love people. They are so excited to people watch because I taught them that it's a fun thing to do. We like to be a little nosy and we like to watch, but we are not going to make noise. And so I repetitively, again and again and again, day after day, as often as possible, took them places where they could be exposed to people without being in direct contact with them. Now, eventually, if you've been following our videos, you know that I built that up to going into public and to being around people and all of those things. We started in strollers and then we went to walking on our own and we did it as a process so they wouldn't be fearful and so they would not have poor behavior instilled in them. We made sure we taught them step by step not to react in certain ways and to react in other ways. So I really like the idea of taking them to grocery stores and to different parking lots where you can actively be surrounded by a lot of sights and sounds and smells and all of those things so your dog can get used to humans and the environment. Now, I didn't originally let my dogs on my furniture. There was a short, not terribly long period of a few months where my girls were not allowed on the furniture while we were still housebreaking them. Once we kind of trained them not to pee in the house, then they were allowed on the furniture with lots of like plastic and blankets and stuff just for the accidents, which meant that they could get on the couch, on the back of the couch, and they could see out the windows. Most of the windows in my house are taller. So they actually, if they were only exclusively on the floor, they wouldn't be able to see out the windows except for the sliding glass door, which is in the backside of the house and doesn't have much traffic because it's like woods and other houses and things like that. So they're not going to see much through the back window, but they would see a lot through that big front picture window. And so I had to train them how to just watch. So all of those principles that I taught inside of the car about engaging with people and how not to bark and how not to growl and how not to whimper, not to cry, all those things were then applied to the couch. And I would sit on the couch with them. Sometimes I would sit with my back to the couch so I couldn't see things. Sometimes I'd sit sideways so that I could look out. Sometimes I literally kneeled on the couch, put my arms on the armrest, and I sat there with them. And in the beginning, it was a lot of touching, a lot of hands on the dog so that I could physically guide them through the process like I had with the car. And then I slowly built away from the massive hands-on training. So I would have arms around both of my dogs, or if it was just one of the dogs, I would have on their head or on their shoulders and on their side. I would make sure I was physically wrapped around these dogs so I could very easily communicate through my words and through physical touch with my girls. And I would tell them, just watch, just watch. And I would sit there and repeat, just watch, just watch, just watch, just watch again and again and again to make sure they wouldn't start up. And then the better they did with it, the less often I would have to say it. So now, if they're across the room from me and they see something outside, I can look over and say, just watch. And for 95% of the time, they do. Again, they're still puppies. Sometimes there's new things. Sometimes some things are just so overwhelming if the squirrels are just too close to their yard. But for the most part, I can tell them just watch, and they'll zip it and they'll watch. Now, sometimes they get each other going and then it becomes a game, and that's an entirely different matter. But as long as you are doing that training where you're assimilating them to humanity and to environments with a lot of stuff going on, you can then transition that into your home where you're likely to have less traffic outside, less people walking around, less, so that it's more of a rare occurrence. And then as long as you are doing that hands-on training where you're physically communicating to them through touch and through words, and with repetition, you're going to be able to build up on that so that your dogs are going to be able to be really well behaved while they're watching out of the window and seeing the world around them. It's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. So from the moment you bring your dog into your home, whether it's a puppy or a dog that you've adopted at an older age, you are going to start working on this process. And I highly recommend going to highly involved and highly engaged areas and letting them see through that glass of the car, and then bringing it into the home and how you're going to be doing things around. And until that point, block it off. In fact, even if you're struggling with this, and again, I'm not a professional dog trainer, just somebody who's been really good at training dogs for a while, I do recommend if you're struggling with it, if your dog is just constantly going off at things, block your windows. I know it's not always easy. I know it's not always great. I have had to go to the lengths of like taking ottomans and bins and like all sorts of stuff to block my couch because I didn't want my dogs jumping up and barking at things or seeing the neighbors or whatever it happened to be. I would have to block it. Or if I was live streaming and couldn't risk them potentially barking, I would have to block it. And not only block it with like the ottomans and the bins and the stuff, I would have to do 2 levels because Lucy is such a high jumper and climber. I'm pretty sure she's part mountain goat. And she would just boop right on over. So I had to build it up to block it. I know it can be a process. I know that it's a hassle. I know it's not fun. And I know it doesn't always work. But the more you can block and curb the behavior we don't want to facilitate in them, and then you can control the times when they can see out so that you can be right there to do the hands-on conversations with them, the better and the faster you're likely to accomplish what you are trying to accomplish with this, and that is to curb that barking and curb that noise when they're watching outside. So if you want, you can use the just watch command. It has worked really, really well for us. It's worked well in my car. It's worked well at home. It has worked well in hotels. It's worked well when we're out in the yard and like somebody drives by or somebody walks by, or when we're on vacation at the beach and there's something that gets them. I can say just watch as we're walking by and that'll stop it. And so it's worked really, really well for us. I hope it works really well for you too. If you've got tips on this, if you have ideas or things that have worked for you, go ahead and let us know down below. And if you have things that you would like me to weigh in on, by all means, go ahead and let me know. I am here to help you live your best dog parent life, from teaching you how to travel with your dogs, to take better photos and documentation of your dogs, to health and wellness and more. I want to make sure we have the answers for you, and I am bringing people onto this channel to get professionals to answer this for you as well. So if I don't have the answers to something, I will bring on people who do. So now's the time. Drop your questions. We'll see you in the upcoming videos.